One of the real simple things that we train on, that we just pound into firefighters' brains is LCES, and they get tired of me saying it. They get tired of the other officers in the department saying it. But lookouts, communications, escape routes, and safety zones. Every time we have a training session or every time we have a training meeting, if we have an after-action review, if we're doing a briefing prior to suppression tactics, we always mention LCES. And not to take away from the 10 standard fire orders or the 18 watch-out situations, but that's a lot of stuff for people to remember. There's 34 things that will save your life on a wildland fire. 4 of them encompass the other 28. The lookouts, communications, escape routes, safety zones, and it needs a P on the end of it for PPE.
Safety zones, areas where you can get into, you can put your engine into, and you'll be safe from the fire. The black is always your best safety zone, an area that's already been burned out. But safety zones are very important, and recognizing those safety zones, making sure everybody's aware of where they're at, and not only having the safety zone, but having the escape route to the safety zone. And as the day progresses, as time passes, you need to reevaluate where these safety zones are. Are they close enough? Are your escape routes still valid? If they're not, change them. Find a new escape route, maybe find new safety zones. But as we said, the fire environment is always changing. Things change over time. Locations change over time. So reevaluation, I put on my watch, I have an hour beep. Every time that thing beeps, I start asking if my plan is still valid. I look at where I'm at, safety zones, escape routes, tactics, weather. Is everything still in line? Everything still working? Put that hour beep on your watch. It helps. As firefighters, we all feel the need to protect somebody's home, and many times we put ourselves at risk in doing so, and we're best off going to a defensive posture, getting people out of harm's way. Let's don't make decisions that put ourselves in a position we can't get out of.
Know where you are at all times, and know where there is a place that you can get to in case something goes south. You need a safe zone.
We increase our barrier that's there, whether it be a highway. In the fire season that we had this winter, a 2-lane highway with improved shoulders wasn't going to stop a fire in a 30-mile-an-hour wind. If you need 10 foot of barrier per 1 foot of flame height, then you're going to need about an 8-lane highway. What we usually do is we'll get down there, we'll anchor into the barrier, whether it's a road, creek, river, anchor into it, use dozers. We've used motor graders, tractors with plows on them. Most commonly we use bulldozers. We'll anchor into it and start burning it out to make it wider. We'll carry the fire to the head of the fire. Now that's the real tricky situation, is getting in front of it. You've got to have somebody that knows where the head of the fire is before you can, commit firefighters out in front of a fire. You cannot get out in front of one, I don't care how far, until you have somebody that knows exactly where the head of the fire is. I hear a lot of people say, well, it's just a gamble. No, it's not a gamble. It's calculated. If you do it right, you can get out in front of it and you can do it safely. If you're sitting on a road and you're waiting for the fire to come to you, and the extreme fire seasons we're having, you're not going to stop it. You just become part of the fuel. We try to stay in the black. The only time we're not is when we're, if we're conducting an indirect attack. And then we're going to be using at least one, usually 2 to 3 lookouts, and that's they're not fighting fire. I mean, they're there just as lookouts to watch the progression of the fire. We identify trigger points on the map. If we are conducting an indirect attack in front of the fire, if the fire passes that trigger point, then we abandon that location and move further out.
In the volunteer fire service, or in the fire service period, we spend an awful lot of time training in structural firefighting. And a lot of times people will try to take what they have learned in structure and change it over, if you will, to grass firefighting, to wildland firefighting. And there's just no parallel, because you don't have an 1 3/4 line. You've got at most an inch, maybe 3/4. You don't have a nozzle that will kick out 120 gallons a minute. You got one that will kick out maybe 15, maybe 30. And a fog pattern simply didn't put out enough water to protect you. It's, you know, we try to draw that parallel. It works to an extent, but it doesn't work to the full extent.
We don't ever want to be in a situation where one of the firefighters that's on the truck's beating on the driver's side door saying, hey, we're out of water, go to the tender, or go to the tanker. That's kind of like being in a structural fire and having an SCBA on. You don't stay in that house, you know, until you're out of air and you're sucking the bottom out of the tank and then try to get out. That's the same situation in a wildland fire. If you run your truck completely out of water and then head to the tender, what happens between where you were at and the tender or a tanker? You know, what happens between there? When you're in a structural fire with an air pack on and that bell goes off, you start finding your way out. 100 gallons is our bail to find our way out and make sure we have some more water. I'll step out on a limb just a little bit and say PPE on a wildland fire needs to be wildland specific PPE. I see guys on the back of a grass truck or walking down a fire line with a rake in structural firefighting gear, in bunker gear. And I think that's just as dangerous as not having the gear on. Very seldom do you see them with the gear worn correctly. And bunker gear is not very good if you don't have the whole ensemble on and have it on correctly. You get so hot, you know, you just well have coveralls on as to have that bunker gear on. And what we end up with there is they'll have their pants and their helmet on and no coat. Nothing protecting their face, no eye protection. Sometimes a ball cap instead of a helmet because a structural helmet is so much heavier and uncomfortable to wear. That stuff's just not designed to wear for extended periods of time on a fire line. This year we've just made the switch. We've provided every member of our fire department with wildland PPE, wildland specific PPE. If you put the LCES with the personal protective equipment and you train just a little bit, you stand a real good chance of bringing home or bringing everybody home in the same condition that they went to the fire in, and that's our #1 goal.